Hello, everybody. I'm Luke Menzel, CEO of the Energy Efficiency Council here in Australia. And on behalf of the Council, our event partners Adelphi and the German Australia Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and our event sponsor, the German government, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's forum, Further, Faster Together, Australian-German Collaboration on Energy Efficiency in Buildings. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this session from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands on which the speakers and attendees at today's forum live and work, and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event. Welcome too to the senior dignitaries from Germany joining us live for today's event. Carsten Muller, member of the German Bundestag and chair of the German Industry Initiative for Energy Efficiency, or DENEF, and Jens Acker from Germany's Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. And welcome to all our other speakers and delegates joining us from Germany, Australia, and indeed around the world. I also want to acknowledge the moment at which we're all coming together. It's been a challenging few months here in my home state of Victoria, which included an extended lockdown. Happily, Australia is now doing pretty well on the health front. However, we're very conscious that many others, including our friends in Germany, are still grappling with this pandemic, indeed with Germany going into a nationwide lockdown today as we record. So rest assured, our thoughts are very much with you and everyone around the world that are still in the throes of grappling with the health impacts of this crisis. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this event has been made possible through a generous contribution from the German government's Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy, for which we are deeply grateful. And it is just the latest in a collaboration program that got started back in September 2019. That's when the Australia-Germany Energy Working Group, which coordinates and drives collaboration on energy issues between German and Australian governments, established an energy efficiency subgroup and appointed two co-chairs, myself and my friend Christoph von Spessart, CEO of the German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce. While it's been a challenging year, we've made a lot of progress, and I think we can say, Christoph, what has emerged is a clear consensus that across the myriad of issues around energy efficiency that Australia and Germany could work together on, it is collaboration on energy efficiency in buildings that is the strategic priority and therefore the first cab off the rank. So today's event is really a launching pad for kicking off the discussion, ramping up knowledge exchange and informing further work in 2021 and beyond. Before we get any further, I want to introduce my dear friend and co-chair of the Energy Efficiency Subgroup, Christoph von Spessart, to say a few words. And firstly, Christoph, can you believe that the German and Australian governments appointed us to drive collaboration between our two favourite countries on our favourite single topic?
Thank you so much, Luke. And I couldn't wish for anyone better than you to do it. And as you just saw in those last 3 minutes, Luke is sometimes called the Pope of energy efficiency in Australia, which is actually a German saying that someone's a Pope. So without going into too much religious detail, I'm so pleased and honored, actually, Luke, that this is one of the first outcome of our joint work, being co-chairs, and a very warm welcome also on behalf of the whole German-Australian Chamber and of course the German-Australian business community to all of you listening to us today. And Luke, you said it quite rightly, it is fantastic to bring this, those two communities in that perspective in energy efficiency together. Some of you know, and that makes me on a personal note extremely happy, that I have been, or that energy efficiency, especially in buildings, has been an important part of my personal and professional life for the last 10 years. So I'm very happy to actually take that pet project, so to say, and with all its importance and its outreach into my new role, and that we as a German Chamber, together with you, with the EEC and with the Adelphi, and thankfully sponsored and supported by the BMWI, that we can really work on this, because there are so many opportunities. And I have to say that I'm optimistic for the development for 3 reasons. Let me just point them out very quickly. We have the Green Deal and in Europe and in Germany, obviously, which is really a long-term project kicked off last year. But then again, we have an additional very timely part of it, which is I would say the acceleration of the recovery plans. The same here, obviously, Luke, you told me about the pre-talk you And obviously there was so much going on during the pandemic. And again, the recovery aspect of the pandemic is an accelerator, and that combined with the great Australian optimism and pioneer spirit makes me extremely optimistic. And obviously the third part, the global development in energy efficiency, being the most significant second pillar of any energy transition, because where you don't need the energy, you don't have to create it, either fossil or renewable. And especially the building sector, I think, is perfect. And the way we want to bring together today expertise from both countries to actually show each other really best practices and make something tangible out of it makes me really optimistic. And I'm extremely happy to really co-host this great webinar with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, there's a global context to this conversation as well as the local context in both of our great nations. The global context is one of real momentum around energy efficiency as a stimulus measure, a conversation led in many ways by the International Energy Agency and the International Monetary Fund that released that fantastic report around sustainable recovery back in June, Christoph, which outlined the numbers, which are really impressive, that of all of the clean stimulus measures that we have available to us in the clean recovery, the energy efficiency jobs multiplier for energy efficiency really tops the charts. 15 jobs created per USD $1 million of investment, and so great bang for the buck, as well as all the other benefits we know derive from energy efficiency in terms of bill savings, in terms of cost savings, and as you say, in terms of supporting the transition on the supply side of the market as well. And I think there's a real awareness of that in both of our nations. And while there's strengths in different places in Germany and in Australia, in some ways that's a fantastic thing, because we have the opportunity to really collaborate, learn from each other, and as we say in the title of today's forum, Christoph, go further faster.
Absolutely well said, Luke. So thanks to all of you for joining today. I think we have a very, very perfect lineup of speakers that bring together vision, bring together very tangible and practical approaches, bring together best practices out of policy, but also on what does it need to get there. Some of you know my magic triangle in energy policy, where I see always said we need carrot sticks and tambourines. And I think we have all of that and more excitingly packed today in that discussion. And without further ado, Luke, I would like to, give you my, how do you say, in Germany would say Segen, to actually start it all and get Lily on board.
Wonderful. Well, I will share with our viewers, Christoph, that I had never heard the term tambourines before. I'd heard the carrots and the sticks, and when you arrived on our shores in, 2016 or 2017 for that first visit, I heard the reference to the tambourine, and I can say that it's been well popularised here in Australia. So the first example of collaboration and knowledge sharing between Germany and Australia in the energy efficiency space, spearheaded by you, Christoph. But as Christoph says, I'm now pleased to introduce Lily D'Ambrosio, Victorian Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change. For our friends in Germany that perhaps aren't familiar with the different states in Australia, Victoria is our second largest state, both in terms of population and economic activity. And in the last month, it has really staked out a leadership position on energy efficiency nationally, committing around $1 billion Australian dollars to energy efficiency stimulus measures. Now, this is a major commitment from a state government here in Australia, with the vast bulk of the funding going towards building upgrades, which is why I was delighted to catch up with Minister D'Ambrosio earlier to explore this announcement and what it is that's on her wish list for energy efficiency collaboration between Australia and Germany. Minister, on behalf of the German Chamber, the Energy Efficiency Council and adelphi, welcome to today's forum.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And I do want to formally acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today. And in particular, where I'm located is the land of the Wurundjeri people, and my respects go to all of their elders, past, present and emerging, and any who may be joining with us here today.
Minister, we have delegates joining us from around Australia, but also from Germany as well. Many of our friends in Germany really interested in deepening collaboration between Australia and Germany on this crucial topic of energy efficiency in buildings.
Well, we certainly do have a special relationship with Germany, and I know that there's a lot of excellent information sharing that is we're very used to, and I know that when it comes to the energy transformation, there is a lot of work that's been happening across the jurisdictions for us to understand and appreciate more greatly as we decarbonise our economy.
And I really appreciate you making the time to help us kick off today's conversation. And there's good reason for inviting you to join us, Minister. As you know, everyone from the International Monetary Fund to the International Energy Agency has called for energy efficiency to be put at the heart of our economic recovery post-COVID-19. And the Victorian state government here in Australia has really heeded those calls, announcing the single biggest investment in residential energy efficiency upgrades by any state in Australian history. Why has your government made investments in energy efficiency a core part of Victoria's economic recovery?
Well, look, I said some time ago that the work that was underway behind the scenes, if you like, by our government in terms of the recovery post-COVID was going to have the energy transformation at its very heart. And certainly that is proven to be the case. We have obviously invested, as you quite rightly put it, the single largest investment into the energy transformation of any state ever in this country. And we've done that for a number of reasons. One is that it actually provides a fantastic opportunity for job stimulus. Energy efficiency alone is the most obvious form of reform to invest in, because we know that the multiplying effect on jobs creation is quite phenomenal. And in a situation where we need that economic stimulus to recover from COVID, as we become COVID safe and get the economy back on track and people into jobs, energy efficiency sector plays a vital role in giving people much needed jobs, but also the added benefit of ensuring that we can achieve fairer outcomes for Victorians, especially those who are most vulnerable and have probably been impacted the most by COVID. And we only have to remember too, of course, that in Victoria in particular, not only did we have COVID, but before COVID, we had probably the worst bushfires in terms of environmental impact that we've seen in many, many decades. And so we can see, just by pointing to those two crises, that it was absolutely critical for us to respond to the need for economic recovery through stimulus of government intervention and assistance, government expenditure, government using its budget book to promote jobs, get jobs happening, and also an opportunity to get fairer outcomes for those who can least afford it when it comes to energy affordability.
And one of the things that's really struck me, looking at some of the new data that's been coming out of the IEA with the release of their International Energy Efficiency Market Report, is commentary on how COVID in particular has impacted on the energy efficiency sector in an outsized way as compared to other areas of the clean energy space, as it were, Minister. And so adding, I guess, another reason to the ledger for governments to step in and really support energy efficiency activity on top of the bill savings, on top of the carbon savings, on top of that big jobs multiplier, the fact that the energy efficiency sector was particularly hard hit in jurisdictions around the world that have had to go into lockdown.
Absolutely correct. As people will know, Victoria has a long-standing record, if you like, in terms of energy efficiency. We've got the Victorian Energy Upgrades, which is by far the strongest and best energy efficiency scheme, white certificate scheme in the country. And it's delivered, just in its 10 years of operation, 60 million tonnes of emission savings and saved $4 billion in energy system costs. And it's also delivered reduction in power bills and, of course, supporting almost 2,500 jobs each year. So it is no surprise, I think, that we would, as a state jurisdiction, go to energy efficiency to drive even further improvements in decarbonisation, savings on energy costs for consumers, and of course creating those jobs. All these three things are a sign of a healthy economy and a government that understands how you can actually drive your investment dollar to achieve three important and interrelated issues: reducing carbon emissions, creating jobs, bill savings, and ensuring, of course, that we take everybody with us along the road to decarbonising our economy, which absolutely is a critical part to our long-term survival and sustainability as a community. And when I say community, I mean that at all levels: local, regional, national and global.
And Minister, that's a really important point. It's a key focus of this announcement, using energy efficiency upgrades to support the most vulnerable Victorians to get out of energy poverty. Can you unpack that for us, why you focus these investments and policy measures on low-income earners and occupants of social housing?
Yes, very, very happy to do so. Our budget will inject $797 million over the next 2 to 3 years. And what it'll do is go towards replacing appliances, supercharging existing programs and driving new standards. And perhaps if I can just touch on some of the key features of those three areas. Our commitment will go to replacing 250,000 old wood, electric or gas heaters with energy efficient reverse cycle air conditioners in the homes of low income households. So when you have a look at what that means, is that not only will we be getting rid of those old energy inefficient, costly and very heavy polluting appliances, not only will we be replacing them with more efficient heating system, but also cooling systems. So thermal comfort for low-income households is a really critical part of this project. But it also means that households will be saving hundreds of dollars each and every year off their energy bills ongoing. And the thousands of jobs, of course, that will be created. We're looking at a total of 4,500 jobs each year will be supported. Many of those are new jobs. About 1,500 jobs will be new. On top of that, we will also be investing in upgrading 35,000 social housing units across our state. And of course, social housing units, that includes also public housing, provides really important housing for so many vulnerable members of our community. And it'll be on a needs basis. I mean, there will be some social housing units which will require minor improvements, small changes to the built environment that will make a world of difference for them, improving their thermal comfort, decreasing their household energy costs, decreasing emissions. We will also be setting new minimum standards for rental properties. We know that many houses built in Australia and, of course, Victoria fail to meet an energy efficiency rating that many parts of Europe, for example, very much hold very dear to them and is part of a normal built environment. In Australia, we have a long way to go with many housing units that are just very, very inefficient. So setting new minimum standards for rental properties will lift the standards not just here in Victoria, but set a very important benchmark for the rest of the country to follow. We want to drive those additional jobs. We want to drive the improved thermal efficiency of people's homes. Those, of course, who are most vulnerable, saving on their energy bills, but importantly, of course, also equally as everything else, reducing those carbon emissions.
Well, Minister, we're almost out of time, but I do have one last question for you, which is around the topic of today's forum, which is collaboration between Australia and Germany on policy and technology around energy efficiency in buildings. What's on your wish list in terms of opportunities for collaboration with our friends in Germany that we can perhaps unpick over the next hour and a half or so?
What I'd like to be able to drive further is the way that each of us have used technology to benefit our citizens, but also the important role that education and behavioural change has to play in people embracing the point of the technology to achieve better efficiencies in the way that we all consume energy, and the important role that the smallest behaviour can have in improvements and the jobs that get created. Now, I know here in Victoria, we are well placed as a state to demonstrate the terrific outcomes that we are receiving from the fact that we've got smart meter technology that exists in every home in the state. Businesses, of course, were the first movers here. They've got smart meter technology. But Victoria still stands as the only jurisdiction in the country with a smart meter in every home. Just think about the audience that can be harnessed, the will that can be harnessed amongst consumers to really drive further the demand response, demand management of our energy system. Being able to establish virtual groups of participants that can help to be orchestrated in the way that energy is consumed, when it is consumed, how it can save the broader energy system, and how it fits into the broader energy system, all towards, of course, becoming far more efficient in the way that we engage with energy, the way we use it, the way we consume it, making sure that we actually push down costs right across the economy. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can take from our state and share with our friends in Germany. In the way that we've done things in Victoria. The state is a very, very large state in size when you compare it to many European countries and Germany itself. The population, of course, is not as big. That in itself, I think, and the challenges that are unique to Victoria and Australia, but in Victoria, I think we can share a lot of our learnings with other states and other jurisdictions. The skills that we have in our state, because of the very strong and ambitious policy settings, I think are second to none when it comes to the sharing of information. And we want to build on the skills that exist in our state. We've got probably I think I can say definitely that we've got the best energy efficiency set of programs in Australia. With that, you can't have that without having a well-equipped and highly skilled workforce to be able to deliver that, and we've got that. So I'm very keen for us to learn from Germany, that is very much a world leader in energy efficiency, and is not unlike Victoria in many ways in terms of the particular natural resources that are renewable energy, if you like, compared to Victoria, that we are similar in that regard. But I think we are also similar in the way that we couple our climate change ambition with jobs, with skills development, so that we actually grow an entire ecosystem of new energy technologies. And I think that is probably the best way to conclude my answer, because I know that skills development, job creation, technological advancement has always been at the heart of Germany and will continue to be. So there's great synergies there for both of us to learn and exchange and share our experiences.
It's a great answer, and I think you're right, Minister. There is a real similarity in terms of the approach you're taking in Victoria and the one taking in Germany around thinking very strategically around the creation of ecosystems around some of these emerging industries that will see us through the 21st century. And you can see that on the renewable side of the ledger, but also the energy efficiency side of the ledger. And the element of your answer, which went to that point around demand management and demand response, the smart meter rollout, the opportunity to really tie all the things that we've been talking about together, the transition on the supply side to renewables being supported through demand response, electrification, good thermal performance in buildings, obviously, incredibly important and a key part of unlocking those demand side resources and giving you the flexibility to heat homes or cool homes in the middle of the day when that solar resource is available. That's something, when I talk to my friends in Germany, they're really fascinated about us, a little bit on the bleeding edge internationally when it comes to that transition, but that means there's incredible learnings here in Australia that we're really keen to share with our friends overseas. So, Minister, it's been incredibly heartening seeing Victoria stake out a leadership position on energy efficiency that is significant, not just in Australia, but around the world. And I'm looking forward to exploring how we can grasp this moment to do what you say, forge deeper links with nations like Germany that are as passionate about energy efficiency as we are here in Victoria.
Well, thank you so much, Luke. And I thank all of you. And I always love the opportunities afforded to me to talk about our terrific relationship with Germany and their representatives here in Victoria. There's lots more for us to do and work together on. And I know that with great ambition, which we do share, that the sky's the limit in this front, and it's about a sustainable economy, it's about a sustainable society, and we're equally dedicated to that cause.
Wonderful. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll agree, some great thoughts there from Minister D'Ambrosio around the interactions between the built environment and an energy system in transition. And one of the things that really strikes me when you think about the 20th century energy system, which was all about big generators remote from cities, poles and wires carrying electricity into those cities, and then the built environment sort of hanging off the edge. We're sort of transforming that very quickly here in Australia and indeed around the world to a point where the built environment, buildings are the energy system. They're integrated into the landscape in a way that they've never been before. And so incredibly important that we think about all of these challenges in an integrated way. And we'll certainly be digging into those topics in the panel discussion later. But for the next half hour or so, I'm going to go have some dinner with my kids. And so I'm going to hand over to my mate, Christoph, so I can connect with them just for 15 or 20 minutes or so. Chairing duties, I'm handing it over to you. Now, I'm going to be very clear, Christoph, this is, I'm handing over the keys to the webinar just for half an hour or so. So I don't want any scratches on it, and I want it back at 7 p.m. sharp, please.
Thank you so much, Luke. And dear ladies and gentlemen, now you know why Luke is also called the David Letterman of energy efficiency. And shame on me that I will never reach this level, but I'm very much trying to do so, dear Luke, and hand the keys over without any scratch and in time. Thank you. I think what Minister Ambrosio just told us is indeed a breakthrough, which since I've been here in Australia, we haven't seen. But without further ado, actually, I'm very happy that we have our next speaker. And we have a contribution here from Germany. We are very happy to have you, dear Jens Acker. Jens is one of the key policymakers and regulators in Germany with more than 10 years experience of energy efficiency and renewables. 4 years of that, Jens, you spent as head of energy and trade in the German embassy in Washington, D.C. in the US. And actually since July this year, you're back in the mothership, so to say, at the BMWI in Berlin, and now as head of division for if I see it correctly, renewable energies in the heating market and the promotion of energy efficiency in buildings at the BMWI. You will give us, I understand, an overview of what Germany has been done, where we are at, and what's the direction, especially with regards to the recovery. Thank you very much, dear Jens. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christoph. Thank you so much, Luke. I think this is a fantastic opportunity, fantastic example of collaboration in difficult times. I think Luke pointed to it. In Germany, we're approaching a lockdown right today. It's fascinating to hear from Australia, from down under, that you're already living in a post-COVID world, and it's really, really great to hear that you mastered this situation so well. It's a good example for us, and we are working hard to follow suit. Yes, I would like to give you a quick overview of the Germans' energy efficiency policy in the building sector. Maybe the next slide already. And yes, just a couple of words. Energy efficiency, to be quite honest, has not been at the forefront of the attention in Germany's energy transition process, the Energiewende, as you might have heard, energy transition process. The developments around the power sector, the ramping up, the marvelous ramping up of renewables in our power sector is much more well known around the world and also in Germany. It's also it's only quite recently, the last couple of years, that energy efficiency policy, which always has been there, has come more and more to the attention also in the public. And also politics have given it a much bigger emphasis. Politicians, as Mr. Carsten Müller, who will speak later to you, really have pushed for this, and I think we're at a very good point in this development. Energy efficiency in the building sector, just a quick overview. 82 million people are living in Germany, 83 almost. They are living in 21 million buildings and in 42 million apartments. Next slide, please. As you might imagine, the building stock is really very, very different. You have the vast majority of houses has been built before the introduction of the first building codes in the late 70s. So there's a tremendous potential for renovations and for savings in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions in Germany account, depending how you're counting, for between 15 and 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions. 15% is the figure if you only count the direct emissions, and our focus is mostly on that. Emissions have come down big time, actually, when you start counting from 1990. To be quite honest, that was a time when the German unification took place, and the eastern part of Germany, where the buildings have been in a very bad shape. Very inefficient buildings came to that, and since then, greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions, came down by 44% until today. Today, the building sector accounts for roughly 120 million tons of CO2. We do have a target to reduce that to 70 million tons over the next 10 years. And this is a target which has been set by law. Next slide, please. Yes, this is what I just said. 70% of the buildings and residential buildings were built before the introductions of the first regulations there. Yeah, 30% of our emissions are coming from that sector. If you look at the direct and indirect emissions, and it's 15% if you only look at the direct emissions. Next slide, please. As I said, energy efficiency in the building sector has come to the forefront of the attention only quite lately. Not only in the building sector, but for the whole of our climate policy, there has been adopted a climate protection program in the fall of 2019, just roughly a year ago. At that time, the government realized that we're lagging behind in the development of curbing the greenhouse gas emissions with a view to the next goals, which are set for 2030 for the next 10 years. And in that course, a lot of measures have been introduced, which, among other things, have given a huge push to energy efficiency in the building sector. One of the most prominent elements of that program has been a ban of oil boilers, which has been set for 2026. To be quite honest, also on this, there are a lot of exceptions to that. Also, there are hardship provisions and everything, but I think the message really resonated with a lot of people. At the same time, we have ramped up the incentive programs for that and offered really high incentives to people who wanted to exchange these boilers, these oil boilers. And I will speak later to that, but that really has sparked a big renovation wave. During the time of COVID, it also helped to bolster the impact of the economic crisis, of the COVID crisis. Part of this climate protection program has been also the issue of making public buildings a role model throughout the nation, and the Energy Efficiency Act has been changed a little bit. We didn't ramp up the standards too high because there's always an issue of keeping social the social aspects of housing and the striving for better energy efficiency and balance. But this is also a very important issue. I just wanted to touch on one important thing. The government, the parliament, has introduced a CO2 price for the building sector and the transport sector, which will start actually next year. As of January next year, we will start to introduce this emission trading scheme in a non-emission trading sector. And this is a very important step. In the first couple of years until 2026, it will start with an administered price. The price will be set by law, by the government, starting with 25 euro a ton CO2 in 2021, which will go up to 55 euro in 2025. So this is a very important development. So I think it was Christoph who was speaking about the carrots, sticks, and tambourines. This is an element of pricing, of carbon pricing, of course, right? And this has been introduced by our parliament also for the building sector. Next slide, please. Yeah, I was talking about the incentive programs, and I have to mention that beside the traditional incentive schemes, the government also introduced for the first time really big tax concessions for renovations in the building sector. It has been introduced for this year, but it will be effective only next year when people will start sending in their tax sheets. And this is a very important step because it lowers the threshold for people to do something in their house. Some people might not want to go to the authority and ask for grants, but they just want to handle this in the course of their taxes, and this is an important feature. But the biggest part has been the ramping up of the existing programs. And this is actually the part that I'm responsible for since this summer. We have we have incentive programs for a long time, which are well established and well known in the public. I believe Bettina Dorendorf from KfW, from our state-owned bank, will speak to you later on this branch, on this part of the incentive programs. But I think this was really a tremendous success of the government. The applications have doubled. They have tripled in the heating sector. I was talking about the ban of oil heated boilers, and this, you can see this here. And it was especially good that this happened during the COVID crisis, because it helped to introduce a stimulus which worked against the negative impact of the COVID crisis. This year alone, we have spent more than $8 billion in subsidies in these incentive programs, and this is a ramp up. It has almost doubled in comparison to 2019. Okay, next year, these programs will undergo a big renovation themselves. They have been around for a long time, and actually in this course, we will introduce even more new features and more improvements to advance the energy efficiency in the building sector. Thank you so much. I think this is an excellent initiative. Thank you so much, Christoph, for organizing this, and yeah, good luck to you, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, dear Jens. Thank you for bringing all this really comprehensive overview of what has happened. And I might just add, whilst you have shown what has been seen there and what Germany has been doing, you also showed the typical German modesty, because I think what you've just shown is actually quite trailblazing and groundbreaking. Because if we see, when I started 10 years ago with energy efficiency, it was less than 1 billion euro in total for the KfW, and now you're at 8 billion euro every year. And as you say, you doubled, and in heating you tripled the applications. Now you have tax incentives. Now everything will be even more with the renovation of the whole package coming next year. That's all from the carrot side, and then also the stick side, I think, is very much going well together. It's a push and pull system which Germany established, and I love the expression renovation wave, because that's something which should resonate in Germany very well, in Australia very well, I guess, being a nation of surfers. So let's bring that renovation wave also to Australia. So talking about the successful program we saw in Germany, there's another real success story here in Australia, and that really is Neighbours. And I'm actually very pleased and honored to have the father of Neighbours here today, which is Carlos Flores. He is the director of the National Australian Built Environment Rating System. That is the long name of Neighbours. And that actually is a real breakthrough. It's Australia's most successful sustainability initiative. It is a rating system, which is, I believe, the heart of Australia's environmental policy. And it is in the building sector. You couldn't live without it anymore. It is so good that actually it kind of took its way and was exported to not just New Zealand, but also the UK. Carlos, as I say, you are the inventor, the innovator, and the implementer of it all. So we are very happy to have you, and thanks for joining us and talk it through, and Neighbours, and how we actually in Germany maybe can learn from that.
Thanks so much, Christoph. And it's been a real journey, and Neighbours has been around for 22 years. And I have been in Neighbours for a long time, but I've only been here for 11 years. So I am one of the many custodians of the program in a long tradition over time. And I also wanted to thank Jens as well, because I think the ambition of what Germany is doing in the built environment is just really, really quite impressive. You guys are trying a lot of things that are different than what we're doing here in Australia. And to me, when we think about climate change is really all about moving as fast as we can, reducing carbon emissions really quickly. We have a very limited amount of time. So sessions like this one about sharing what's working in other countries, what could we actually implement here in Australia, is really important. And also the things that are working here, we really want to be able to share them so others can benefit as well. So thank you so much for organizing this event. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about what Neighbours is, especially if you are from Germany. If you're from Australia, we're also going to have a couple of things that hopefully you haven't heard before. I'm going to start with my first slide to tell you a bit about what Neighbours is. So this slide is what you see on the screen is the Neighbours star rating. And what Neighbours is at its core, if you don't know much about it, is we are a certification scheme for buildings. So we certify buildings on environmental performance. And I'm going to talk about Neighbours Energy, which is focused on energy efficiency, but we also work on Neighbours Water ratings and Neighbours Waste and indoor environment quality ratings. And Neighbours really is based on two very simple principles, which really are going to influence everything I say from this point on. So it's important that we cover them. The first one is that we're based on 100%, 12 months of meter performance. So we use actual electricity and energy and gas and diesel data from on site, 12 months of that. So we don't use design features. We don't use theoretical performance. We use real environmental performance. And the second principle and second thing we do is that we answer this question. We answer, is my building using more or less energy than others? And so we compare the energy that a building is using against a building of the same type, the same size, the same climate zone, the same characteristics and operational conditions. And most important of all, we actually communicate that in a way that is very simple, that a lot of people can understand, not just people who are engineers, but also many, many other people, investors and people who work in leasing and the occupants of of buildings. And so star ratings are actually very easy to communicate. And if you come to Australia and you work in building sustainability, you'll see that NABERS ratings are talked by a lot of people, not just people who are very technical. So if you get a 3-star rating, by the way, it's about average in the market. You can be 0 stars because there's no limit to how inefficient a building can be. And if you have worked on energy efficiency, you would have seen buildings that are very bad indeed. But also you can be 6 stars, which means, you know, roughly using 80% less energy than average. So on my next slide, I wanted to give you just a screenshot of, you know, who's using NABERS in Australia. And what you're seeing here is basically just a screenshot of the central business district of Sydney, which is where I live. And these are all the buildings that have been certified in this small block area of the city in the last 12 months alone. And if you go a couple of blocks to the north of this photo, you'll see the Opera House. So if you've been in Sydney and you've been there, you've been literally been surrounded by hundreds of buildings that are certifying with NABERS every year and setting targets and trying to improve on an annual basis. So on my next slide, I want to give you an idea of what that looks like for one building in particular, and then we're going to zoom out to look at the whole market. So this is Australia Square. It's actually a 50-year-old building, so it's not a new building, and it's a building that has been participating with NABERS for about 15 years. And the blue line is basically showing the star rating result this building got every year. And one reason why I wanted to show you these slides is to explain that NABERS ratings don't last forever. So if you're 3 stars this year and you want to promote yourself at 3 stars next year, you have to prove it again and demonstrate it and at least maintain that performance if you want to keep calling yourself that. And that's been a really key ingredient about encouraging people to look at their energy performance today, set targets, and actually work their way through and try to improve. So they've gone all the way from 0 stars to 5 stars in NABERS Energy, which is so from one of the most inefficient buildings in the city to one of the most efficient by working on it every year, year on year. And what the pink line is showing is energy consumption in the form of energy intensity, because this really is about reducing energy consumption. And the only way to get a better NABERS rating is actually using less energy. And that's, again, a really important design feature that is about reducing the impact on the environment. And that's the only way to get better results. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to give you an idea what NABERS has been used on a voluntary capacity by thousands of buildings, but it's also been the heart of energy policy. And Christoph just mentioned that. And I wanted to show you there's a lot of policies, too many to mention in just 10 minutes. But I do want to show you the impact of 2 policies that is very visible and quite impactful. So now we're talking about one sector, is the office market in Australia. And what you're looking at is a graph of the number of buildings that are certifying with NABERS on an annual basis in this market for the past 22 years. And what you'll see is that there was a big jump in about 2005. By the way, FY means financial year in Australia. There was a big jump in 2005. That's when governments brought a procurement policy. Basically, if you're a government department and you want to rent a building from the private sector, that building needs to have a NABERS rating, and it must be better than a minimum. So if it's more inefficient than that, you're not allowed to rent it, and it means that building is not going to get the business of the government. So when that happened, a lot of people came into the program, started to certify all their buildings, and started to set targets and trying to improve and get into that energy efficiency zone. And the second one is disclosure. So from 2010, all buildings in Australia have to disclose their NABERS rating when they're renting an office or when you're selling the building to someone else. So that means, showing it outside of the building on the sign, for rent, or if you're putting it on a website and offering the space, or on the lease with the tenants, everyone needs to know how efficient or inefficient that building is. Now, and that policy really brought pretty much every building in the office market today in Australia is certified under NABERS every year. Now, obviously, ratings is not the end goal. It's just a means to an end. This is all about reducing environmental impact. So I want to show you one graph about the impact of these 2 policies in the last 15 years, which is my next slide. And this is the impact. So what you're looking at is energy intensity. We broke in this whole group. This is pretty much every building in office building in Australia. And we have them broken down into buildings that joined around 2006, before NABERS was mandatory. A lot of them came because of this government leasing procurement policies, and they came and they used quite a bit of energy, but they've gone every year going down over time and using less energy for 15 years in a row, and still counting. Every year we see these buildings using less energy. And in 2010, when mandatory disclosure came in, these buildings were, these were no longer the leaders of the market. That's the pink line. So the big portfolios are all in the pink line. These were smaller buildings, private portfolios, buildings that were owned by an investor very far away, so they probably weren't looking at the asset as much. And they use way more energy than the market leaders that had joined NABERS before when they joined the program. But in the last 9 years, they've actually used, they dropped their energy consumption by 35% in just 9 years on average. And what I love about this graph is that this is the entire office market in Australia reducing energy consumption, what is likely to be the single fastest reduction of energy use in any building sector in any country in the world. And it's partly because of the role that NABERS has played, but also because NABERS encourages you must reduce energy consumption to get better. So it's actually encouraging the right behavior in the first place. I want to close with one last slide. So I want to zoom out. This is no longer offices only now. We're talking about several sectors here, but what we do is I want to show you how fast buildings improve when they're participating in NABERS. So this is thousands of buildings in 3 or 4 markets. And we take the first time a building gets the first NABERS rating as a baseline, and then we see what happens a year later, and 2 years later, and 3 years later. Are they using less energy consumption? And this is the average improvement for those thousands of buildings. It's 33% after 10 years, and it's not cherry picking. If you pick the 10% best, we see 50, 60, 70% reductions as well. That's the end of my 10 minutes. I'm going to be a little bit later on the panel, and so if you have any questions, just write it in the Q&A, and we'll see you in about 10 or 15.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I'm not just overwhelmed by the instrument itself, but also by the way you presented it, and extremely good in time. So Luke won't be angry with me. But thanks again for this wonderful instrument. And it's, as you say, I really like this mixture of ambition, of disclosure, and actually to kind of name and shame where you are, but then again to actually reward the people who are in those good office buildings. Having said that, talking about incentives, we have with Bettina, one of the most experienced experts in financing energy efficiency, I guess not just in Germany or in Europe, but in the world. And thank you for joining Bettina today. You are a vice president of Germany's unique KfW, and you've been working with KfW for more than 15 years, I understand. You are actually overseeing sustainability activities of the bank and also looking for sustainable finance related topics and projects. But you also have been seconded not just to the Federal Ministry of Finance in Germany, but also to the European Commission to actually establish the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group, which actually created a report on how to increase investment into energy efficiency. So I'm very thankful that we have you as an expert today, and that you will kind of dig deep into KfW and talk us through this. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours, dear Bettina.
Thank you very much. So good evening to those of you who listen from Australia, and good morning to those who are attending the webinar from Germany. Thank you, Mrs. Bessert, for this very kind introduction. And thank you for inviting KfW to participate in this webinar. I have the pleasure to introduce you today to the main features of KfW's flagship program to support energy efficient construction and refurbishment in the building sector. The short time will only allow me to provide you with a brief overview, but with pleasure, we will explain in more detail at a later stage. Next slide, please. In Germany, there are in total 18 promotional banks, so 16 of them operating on a regional level, on the level of the federal states, and 2 operating on a national level. KfW is the largest one. The second national promotional bank is dedicated to the agricultural sector. So KfW has been established more than 70 years ago as a promotional bank of the Federal Republic of Germany. It is headquartered in Frankfurt and has over 80 offices worldwide. To give you an idea of the size of the operations, the balance sheet volume is approximately 500 billion euros, and the financing volume in 2019 was 77 billion euros. In 2020, it will be much, much more due to the COVID-19 aid, but also due to the effect of increasing the funds provided for the energy efficiency support programs. KfW refinances itself on the capital market and benefits from a strong AAA rating due to a state guarantee. Next slide, please. KfW operates with 5 business divisions. The domestic promotional activities make up roughly 60 to 70% of the financing volume. We address the corporate and private clients with large volume, highly standardized and digitalized programs, as well as public clients. KfW also provides large individual financing solutions and supports startup companies. The international business comprises commercial export and project finance activities via the IPEX Bank, and we also provide development finance on behalf of the federal government. Next slide, please. KfW is one of the leading promotional banks worldwide, and with our promotional products, we help addressing the large mega trends such as climate change and environment, globalization, social change, and digitalization. We offer a broad spectrum of tailored instruments such as loans, equities, investment grants, and risk-sharing solutions. We always work on behalf of the federal government. Next slide, please. Roughly 75% of our activities is processed via the on-lending model. KfW does not have branch offices. Instead, we work with a broad network of financing partners, such as commercial banks, savings banks, and insurance companies. Under KfW law, KfW must generally involve banks or other financing institutions when granting financing. Therefore, KfW extends loans to commercial banks or financing partners, which in turn on-lend these funds to the ultimate borrower. By lending to commercial banks, KfW gains the benefit of the commercial bank's knowledge of the customers as well as their administrative and service expertise. So KfW does not take credit risk. The credit risk of the borrowers is taken by the commercial financing partners, and this leads to a broad diversification of risks. The financing partners on top obtain a small an attractive handling fee to process the promotional products, and they also benefit from the fact that they do not have to refinance the loans themselves. It's KfW refinancing this portion of their business. Another benefit for the commercial banks is the fact that they can enhance and broaden their spectrum of products and enhance their cross-selling opportunities. Next slide, please. KfW offers a large spectrum of promotional support programs via loans and grants for residential, for commercial, and for public buildings. We have developed a best practice promotional scheme to finance energy efficiency in the building sector. This is a veritable success story. Since its inception 13 years ago, the program Energy Efficient Construction and Refurbishment has provided promotional support over 5.6 million housing units as per end of 2019. And this year, the success even increased. So more than 800,000 housing units came on top only in 2020. According to a yearly evaluation we conduct of the program, the CO2 emission reduction triggered by the investments financed with the support of the promotional scheme amounts to almost 11 million tons per year now. KfW has developed a market standard. This is the so-called KfW Efficiency House. this standard is based on the current legislation regarding primary energy demand and transmission heat loss in a new building. So this is important because I will explain this in more detail on the basis of the structural setup of the support programs. So as a basic principle, promotion is granted if the degree of efficiency reached with the investment goes significantly beyond the legally required level. So the higher the degree of efficiency, the higher the level of promotion. So a customer will have access to promotional incentives defined for a KfW efficiency house if, as a result of the energy efficiency measures implemented, the primary energy demand is only 55% of what is required by the current legal framework. So this resulting in 45% energy savings. Next slide, please. We can skip this. This describes the efficiency house. Next slide, please. Let's have a look at the setup of the program for energy efficient construction. As you see on the left side on the bottom, the starting point is a reference building defined in the building code. And based on this reference building, different levels of promotion is defined. So you see the efficiency house 55, efficiency house 40, and efficiency house 40 plus. The plus stands for the involvement of renewable energy components. And I show you this slide to highlight the fact that the main promotional element is not the interest rate, because the interest rate is basically the same for all promotional levels. The main promotional element is the partial debt relief, meaning that the customer does not have to repay 100% of the loan amount, but 100% minus, let's take the 40 plus level as an example, 100% minus 25%. So only 75% of the loan amount has to be repaid. Next slide, please. For energy efficient refurbishment, the program offers a high degree of flexibility. Customers have the choice between loans and investment grants. And the customers also have the choice between or going for a comprehensive refurbishment package. And here we offer in total 5 levels of promotion from KfW Efficiency House 55 to KfW Efficiency House 115, plus a special level for monuments. Customers also can go for just single measures. So a high degree of flexibility. The loan volume available for comprehensive refurbishment is 120,000 euros per housing unit. For single measures, it's 50,000 euros per housing unit. And as you see, again, the partial debt relief is the most important most important component of promotional support. One of the very important features of the program and also important elements of success is the mandatory involvement of an energy expert in the application and approval process for promotional support for energy efficient construction and refurbishment. The private customers benefit from expert support and guidance in the planning and implementation process of their investment measures. And this is very important because many of the private customers and households need a strong orientation as regards what to do, how to plan, and how to organize an energy efficient investment and refurbishment measure in their households and buildings. So the energy expert plays a key role. Only with their signature the promotional funds can be paid out. So at the beginning, they sign up the application and they have to sign also the after implementation of the refurbishment of building measures, they have to sign up once again and confirm that the measures have been implemented in line with KfW's promotional conditions. So in order to bear the cost of the involvement of the energy expert, an extra promotional grant is available covering 50% of the cost, up to 4,000 euros per applicant. This will even be improved from 2021 onwards. Another important feature is the fact that all these experts are listed in a dedicated energy efficiency expert list. This dedicated pool of experts has been created in cooperation between the German Energy Agency, the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Environment, and KfW. And these days, approximately 13,000 experts are listed in this pool. They have an exclusive access to the market of energy efficiency advisory services regarding KfW's support programs. They have to prove their professional qualification. Every 3 years, they have to relist to this list, to this pool, and in the meantime, they have to undergo training to keep up with technical, legal, and market development. This is also a very important element of quality management and control because at the end of the day, public funds are provided, paid out with the support programs for energy efficiency. So next slide, please. So lots more can be said, but let me sum up by underlining that the promotion products which are well prepared for the future have to be easy to understand, easy to access, and easy to apply for. And we make sure this is the case by offering the promotional products via digital channels. They have to be everywhere where the customer seeks for information. So it's very important to make sure that there's a high degree of awareness of the promotional support. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Bettina, for this really comprehensive and deep insight about the KfW. And you're absolutely right. It is an extremely successful instrument. And what may look complex from the architecture is actually very easy for the customer and the consumer. So if you have not all of it seen in that short presentation, be rest assured, we will write it all down in a report. And also, dear Luke, I hope you had a great dinner. I can tell you we had a lot of interesting facts and good fun. And you've missed something, to be honest, sorry. But you have the chance, dear Luke, to actually watch it again, because we actually record this session and we will make a little video. So after dinner, you can watch it with your kids.
Well, Christoph, you won't be surprised to hear, as the energy efficiency tragic that I am, is that I quickly went out, grabbed a bowl of food, and then ran back in here. And I think I missed about 4 minutes of Jens' presentation. So I will catch up on those later when the video is released. Cool. And I promise I'll catch up with my kids directly after this session as well, because I'm also committed to my relationship with them. I was just reflecting, Christoph, actually, and so fantastic to hear Bettina's presentation and to bring the good news of the KfW to Australia. I was lucky enough to catch up with the Berlin head of the KfW when I was a part of a delegation to Germany on the topic of energy efficiency back in, I believe it was 2016, and was really struck by how powerful the KfW was. As you say, it can seem complex, but it's actually a very straightforward and simple once you get into the detail, because it encourages energy efficiency investments when people are open to considering them, when they're engaging with the retail banks, and when they're thinking about making changes, either because they're contemplating renovation or buying a new home. And also it supports that really sophisticated ecosystem of support and experts, which ultimately makes it so much easier for people to act on the energy efficiency opportunity. So lots to learn there, Christoph.
And vice versa. I think Germany is keen to hear about neighbors and about the success of this extremely interesting instrument, which potentially we will hopefully have in Germany soon too.
Well, Christoph, thank you for holding the thought. You will be joining us again at the end of the session for your reflections. So I look forward to those. But in the meantime, we're going to now introduce our panel. and our panel consists of 4 experts, 2 from Germany and 2 from Australia. I'm going to introduce them all, and then we'll hear from each of them in turn. Then we'll bring them together for a discussion and a Q&A. And during this panel, we are encouraging questions from the floor, so please make use of the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So I will welcome our 4 panelists. First, cab off the rank is Carsten Muller, member of the German Bundestag and chair of the Energy Efficiency Council sister organisation in Germany, the German Industry Initiative for Energy Efficiency, or DENEF. Welcome, Carsten.
Hi.
Welcome too to Grace Tam, Director of Debt Markets at Australia's Green Bank, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us is Tanya Lewis, Managing Director of Germany's CO2 Online, and I believe also a board member of DENEF, Tanya. And of course, sticking around from the previous session because we couldn't stop him if we tried, is Carlos Flores, Director of the Neighbours Program here in Australia. Welcome back, Carlos.
Great to be here, Luke.
So, Carsten, we'll start with you. We had the pleasure of meeting you when you visited Australia in 2019, and I know you met with a number of local leaders, including energy and climate ministers right around the country. So, having had the benefit of visiting Australia, of reflecting on the relationship between the two nations, and also having heard some of the presentations over the last hour or so, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for collaboration between Germany and Australia on improving energy efficiency in the building sector?
From my point of view, the main goal is that we are like-minded countries. So, as we heard from Lily, there are a lot of similarities, although there are about 15,000 miles between Germany and Australia. And and there's another parallel. So we were going ahead phasing out of nuclear and phasing out of coal till 2038, and that puts a lot of pressure on the energy efficiency regulation and the system. And so I would say that's a good idea to work together.
Yeah. And it's absolutely the case that our two nations both have energy systems in transition, and there's different drivers for that in both of our nations. One of the key drivers in Australia, of course, is the fact that many of our large-scale generators are just incredibly old, and so we need to replace them. And so that kicks along the conversation here in an Australian context and highlights.
But to be honest, what I learned is that Australia is maybe that's the situation with the private housings, but looking on the commercial buildings, we have to admit that Australia is far ahead of Germany. So we can learn from each other.
And what is the situation with commercial buildings in Germany? I have heard this said that that there's been a lot of success on the residential side of the ledger. There's been less progress on the commercial building side. Is that correct, Carsten?
That's correct, yeah. And I find that's a top idea, neighbors. So I would say that we have to work harder on make the efforts of energy efficiency more visible to the users, especially in the commercial buildings.
Well, I can report, and I'm sure Carlos will share later on, that we have 2 international partners that have adopted neighbours, a long-standing partner in New Zealand in our region, Carsten, but just last week we had the United Kingdom launch neighbours for the first time. And so there is an opportunity there, I suppose, to jump on the neighbours bandwagon there in Germany if you're so inclined.
Carsten, I think the one thing that is so interesting when we think about climate change, how nobody is leading everywhere. Every country is leading in some areas, in other areas are trailing others. And the example you mentioned in Australia is the complete opposite. I think we've done incredibly well in non-residential buildings, and in residential buildings we're sometimes like 10 or 20 years behind Germany. And so we have a lot that we can share and learn from each other, I think, working together.
Which I think is one of the reasons why, and I mentioned the close engagement we've had with both the Australian and the German governments in terms of defining the focus for this subgroup that Christoph and I are chairing is why buildings are the first cab off the rank, because there is that incredible symmetry in terms of residential and commercial, and the opportunity for sharing and exchange that is mutually beneficial from both directions. But you raise residential, so that's my cue to bring you in, Grace. I know that the CFC has been piloting some work in the residential space with one of our retail banks here in Australia, Bank Australia. Could you just briefly explain to our German audience a little bit about that work for us?
Yes, no problem. And I think it might be worth starting with why we created a green home loan product. In Australia, home loans is a very big sector in Australia, and home loan definition is very much driven by how banks and non-bank home loan lenders can refinance those loans in the capital markets. So the definition is by default defined by how they can fund and what they can fund in the capital markets. And what we found was about 3 years ago, the Climate Bond Initiative introduced a green home loan taxonomy for Australia. Australia has 6 states and territories, and they define criteria for 3 states. So on the back of that, one of the major banks in Australia launched a green residential mortgage-backed securitisation bond into the market using that criteria. And that became very successful, and it brought to the attention of a lot of the home loan lenders in Australia the benefit of creating a green home loan pool, because it attracts a lot of overseas green investors in the market. But given that criteria only covers 3 states out of 6 in Australia, some lenders, all banks need to originate their home loan nationally. So some lenders started making up their criteria. And to give you an example, some lenders defined a home built in a certain state back in 2004 as being green. And we know that's not the case, because 2004 is old technology. So we saw a need for us, being the Australian government's green bank, to set a minimum standard in Australia and to define what is green from an energy efficiency perspective, which is what we did. So we set out defining this product, and it's very similar to what Bettina spoke about, and the product being green, simple and flexible. So we had to find ways to define the green element, and we use a NetHurst certificate, and that's for residential home energy efficiency rating. So it's the sister company or rating scheme to Carlos in Neighbours. And we defined that as being 1 star above minimum building code requirement in Australia. And that certificate is available nationally, and that then creates this national green home loan product. And that certificate makes it very simple to incorporate into the home lending process, as well as very simple for borrowers to understand and obtain that certificate. And it's also flexible because it caters for both construction and refurbishment. And on the refurbishment side, we have also adopted the Victorian government's energy efficiency scorecard, where an assessor actually comes into your home and provides you feedback as to how you can lift the energy efficiency of your home. And the reason why we launched the product with Bank Australia, which is based in Victoria, is once we've defined a product, being a green bank, we don't do individual home lending. So similar to KfW, we had to find a commercial bank who would be willing to work with us. Bank Australia has a well-known brand for being sustainable. They talk about being Australia's clean bank, and they took up the green home loan product very quickly. And that was launched in January. And we went out with a discount jointly contributed between us and Bank Australia of 40 basis points, so 20 from CEFC and 20 from Bank Australia. And that program's been very successful. It has delivered very engaging conversations between Bank Australia and their customers. And also, even though we set the minimum star rating of 7, they have customers who have far exceeded that, up to the maximum star rating of 10 star, which means it's not taking any energy from the grid. It's in fact generating energy and putting it back into the system. So what we want to do now is to find more commercial banks who are willing to work with us on launching the green home loan product, and also work with the investor side on the capital markets to raise awareness as to the benefits of this product and the carbon abatement outcome. And hopefully we will be able to generate an ecosystem in Australia where green home loans become a standard product that is available in Australia without the need of our involvement in terms of providing a discount. So that's nirvana for us.
And obviously some incredible parallels between your work here in Australia, Grace, and your colleagues at the CFC with what the journey the KfW has been on for a number of years now, in terms of the partnership with the retail banks, sort of defining a standard that can be met in the market and making it as easy as possible for consumers to engage. And I think you've answered my question, which was, are there plans to roll this out to other retail banks in Australia? It sounds like there are.
Oh, there are, and there are a lot of interest. But the challenge is Bank Australia being so ingrained in terms of sustainability, they understood a lot of the elements already, whereas with the standard retail bank, they don't have that, and also they're much larger workforce. So trying to work through that process is quite challenging. So we're also talking to the non-bank lenders in Australia who are a lot more nimble and also depend a lot more on institutional financial market funding, and they will be able to move much faster to get the green home loan product launched.
And for our friends in Germany, we should note that there's a whole process in train in Australia around, I guess, reform and policy around energy performance in both new homes and existing homes, and that includes the creation of a national disclosure regime for energy performance. You mentioned the one that we have in Victoria. There's also one in the ACT, but we don't have a national program, let alone a mandatory one that exists in Germany. Is that something that you're looking forward to or keeping a weather eye on? And would that help, make the whole process that much more easier, if and when we get to that point where that disclosure regime is available?
Yeah, absolutely. What we're doing here is also in the background creating a database of the energy rating of homes, and that is through the banks because they need to collect that to demonstrate when they refinance the loan as to the energy efficiency score of that home. So through rolling out the Green Home Loans program, we are generating this data, and then through that we want to then demonstrate the fact that green home loans attract more prudent customers, which will lead to a lower default rate and hopefully then lead to lower regulatory capital, which lead to more banks looking to finance green home loans. And also what we really want to do is for green home loans to be so bread and butter in Australia that not only owner-occupied loans, but investment loans for rental will also have that energy efficiency uplift. So that's where we're looking to go to. And I'm aware that NatHERS is looking to roll out NatHERS for existing homes tool. Right now, it's only available for new builds. About middle of next year, they will roll out nationally this tool for existing homes, which will really complement the renovation side of the green home loan.
Which is incredibly important given the task that we have before us. As Carlos said, starting a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of driving energy performance improvements in our residential sector. That the availability of that tool, Grace, as you say, will make it that much easier. Tanya, there's been a number of references now to the ecosystem that sits around these policy measures. We know that with good policy, things like minimum standards and energy performance disclosure and the right mix of incentives, innovative business models will emerge to drive building upgrades at scale. And your organisation, CO2 Online, is an example of that. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the role your organisation plays in Germany and how it works to deliver and scale up energy efficiency retrofits.
Yes, sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having me here in your VIP energy efficiency circle. It's a great pleasure. And I try to take the opportunity to explain a little bit our approach of CO2 Online. We are a non-profit organization, mainly funded by the Ministry of Environment. And our approach is that we set up an online advisor ecosystem in a way. Those online advisors are reachable at many, many touch points in the internet, and they include the most important topic and questions about my personal CO2 impact. What can I do? How is my baseline? What's the benchmark? What are actions I could take as a house owner or a tenant? So that's important. We are focused on residential buildings, on house owners and tenants. This is our main focus group. And at the end of an online advisor, there's the opportunity of getting a feedback as well. And to give you an idea how many people we reach, every month we reach about 40,000 people who take or use one of those online advisors. And over the years, we started in 2004, we set up a kind of big market research. We have a market survey because we are able to ask the people what they did after using an online advisors, if they took any actions, if they didn't take any actions, what were the reasons why they didn't do anything, if they used any funding program, if they understood the funding program, and so on. So yeah, this is like a huge market research ecosystem. It's we get a lot of feedback from the house owners and the tenants, and we know how to do the communication and which kind of topics, what kind of questions people have to get into action to reduce their personal CO2 emissions. And we heard it before. It came from Lili D'Ambrosia. She said, we have to think about the behavior change. I mean, it's great to have a lot of funding and have a lot of programs and have a lot of facts and figures, but we have to take the hands of people and help them step by step to get into climate action.
So, Tanya, having operated since 2004, and as you say, having this incredible data set of, what is happening in the market, what's motivating action, what is prompting people to go on that journey through energy efficiency upgrades. Have you been able to notice a ramp up in sophistication in the market over that period in Germany, and by the same token, have you been able to refine your methods of engagement to improve, I guess, the success rate of people sort of not just expressing an interest at the start, but going on that whole energy efficiency investment journey?
I can remember when I started at CO2 Online, I always had to explain energy saving. I had to explain carbon emissions. So the knowledge has raised and the involvement has raised as well. I mean, nearly 1 year ago, Fridays for Future was a huge movement, and people got more interested in what can I do at home, what's possible. And what we noticed is that the potential of the technique has raised. I mean, there's so many systems, there are so many opportunities at the market, but it's difficult for people to really use the potential at home. So it's important to measure. Very, very important to measure and to analyze and to find out where maybe are some points where you have to get into action and to optimize the system. So I think there was one of the questions from the audience asking the potential of smart meters. We say smart meter is not the action which is saving energy, but if you combine it with feedback system, it's a big opportunity because people find out about their potential, where they can save energy and what's the benchmark and if they are better or less better than their neighbors.
And there in Germany, Tanya, obviously incredibly a challenging year, 2020. In some ways, a lot of things working against people making investments. But fascinating to hear from Jens that some of the support programs, for example, for heat pumps rollout has actually been very, very well subscribed and really an incredible take up of those new programs that were launched at the start of the year. What's the story of 2020 been in terms of consumer interest and investment in energy efficiency?
We always check out what kind of questions we get from our users and what online advisors they use, and the most important question is always about funding and where do I get a loan and where can I save something, and the interest is still very high. And in May, when we were just in the middle of our first lockdown, we asked our audience, our consumers, so do you still plan your modernization idea, or do you maybe stop it because you're unsure, you want to save the money for something else? And they said, no, now I do the renovation I planned so far because, maybe I'm not going on my holidays. So I spent the summer in my house in Germany, and in June and July, I want to have it nicely. And I spent the money in a new isolation or new windows or a new heating system. So, and we got the same response from the market, from the installers, because they were still allowed to go into the houses and do the jobs. So the market is still very, very busy.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, and it's a experience that is to some degree mirrored here in Australia, and there's some data from the US that tells the same story, which that in periods of lockdown, there's been a heightened appreciation of the comfort and thermal performance of our homes, which is actually in an Australian context prompted an uptick in investment in insulation, and particularly do-it-yourself insulation projects, as people were here in Melbourne contemplating a very cold winter and a very long lockdown, and they thought, well, I'm tired of living in this drafty, leaky house. I'm going to do something about it, and equipment upgrades have been a part of that as well. And it strikes me, Carsten, that listening to Tanya, you and as a parliamentarian who has a deep interest in the various programs that the German government is rolling out in this space, it must be incredibly heartening to have foot soldiers like Tanya on the ground, kind of working with customers to leverage those grant programs and make sure they have a good understanding of how to take advantage of them. And it kind of speaks to the really sophisticated ecosystem you've been able to develop there in Germany around the residential sector.
It's not only about save climate and save the world, but it's also about comfort. And people who have to stay at home, they care more about comfort in their homes, and they want to have it nice and warm or maybe cold. So that's a big point, and that results also. And I want to come back to one point that was made by Lily at the very beginning. It's also about economics, and it's about jobs. So just to give you an idea, we have in the energy efficiency sector, I'm in the board of DENA together with Tanya. We have about more than 600,000 people working only in Germany in the energy efficiency sector. And we have growth rates sometimes 5 times higher than the average growth rate in Germany. So that is very important also for the economy, especially when we're talking about COVID-19 recovery. So there are some more challenges to come, and that's also a good opportunity for a close collaboration between Australia and Europe and Germany. If I think of changing to a hydrogen-based society, and we have to talk, when we talk hydrogen, we have to talk also about energy efficiency, because that only makes sense if it comes together.
Completely agree, and you've hit upon another hot topic in the energy working group between Germany and Australia that Christoph and I are both part of. And hydrogen, not core business for the Energy Efficiency Council, but I know the German Chamber is doing some fantastic work driving collaboration between Germany and Australia on that other incredibly important topic. But as you say, they speak to each other. And it speaks to the role of energy efficiency in lowering the cost of that supply side transition, whether it's moving to renewable gases like hydrogen or electrification or the like. It's got a huge role to play, Carsten. Carlos, I might bring you in at this point. You've had an opportunity to talk a little bit about neighbours. I might turn to you as a resident expert and observer, someone with a keen interest in moving further faster, both here in Australia, but also with a weather eye around the world. Having listened to all of these comments and presentations, what strikes you as being key areas for collaboration, co-investment, further work between Germany and Australia in particular that will help us both meet our energy and climate goals?
Yeah, well, I'll say my first lesson is how important it is that we're doing sessions like this, because I feel like just being a panelist in this session, learn about 4 or 5 things that I had no idea they were happening in Germany. But I think if there's a couple of things that I think we could really learn from Germany in particular, is obviously everything you're doing in residential are things that we should pay close attention, because we are quite behind. We know that we need to catch up quickly, and it's a huge, a huge gap in our ability to progress sustainability in the built environment. Half of the sector is residential, and in that half, we made a lot less progress than in the other half. So definitely an area that we need to focus there. I think what I was really interested as well is that is to hear about a lot of the financial mechanisms that Germany is working at all levels, from tax incentives to grants to loans. And I think Australia in general as a whole, we've done significantly less work in that space. And I'm actually so thankful that we have the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, because they've been great and they really brought a lot of energy into that space and doing some really amazing things as Australia's Green Bank. And if we didn't have them, we would be even further behind on that. But I think and maybe one area for us in particular, I think we can get a lot more of, is that I think particularly within neighbours, we found a way. A lot of those improvements in energy consumption that I showed earlier have actually been with like almost no government intervention, like very, very light regulation. Disclose your energy performance with a rating that costs a couple of $1,000s. Like it's very, very light touch. Nobody's forced to improve anything, right? But we've seen extremely fast reduction, entirely driven by the private sector and at an enormous scale in some sectors like offices, sectors like shopping centers. I think a challenge in Australia is, can we actually bring that to all sectors of the Australian economy in the next decade? Like, can we mobilize a huge portion of the economy self-improving on an annual basis? And I think that is within reach. I think if we made it work in a few sectors, I think our challenge is, can we do it in 10 sectors? But the fact that we did it in 2 or 3, I think it makes it possible. Maybe one thing that we definitely need to learn from Germany, though, is that model, I really believe that we could mobilize maybe half, maybe more than that in terms of the non-residential building sector. But there are parts of this sector that really, really need additional support if we need to move at the speed that we need to move to solve climate change. And I think the areas like grants and training and are areas where we have invested significantly less than Germany. So I think there's some things that we can that have worked really well that I think could work in Germany as well. Definitely a lot of things that we can learn from you out there in the Northern Hemisphere.
And Carlos, I think it might just be worth just very briefly noting that the Australian government has just committed a significant investment into the expansion of neighbours to other sectors of the built environment. Noting, of course, that neighbours isn't a generic tool. Even if you just focus on neighbours energy, there's tailored products that address key segments of the built environment. Do you just want to speak very quickly to that, Carlos?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we often talk about buildings, but most of the people we work with don't think of themselves as the building sector, because the moment you get out of offices and shopping centers. We work with data centers. They think of themselves as a technology sector. We work with hotels. They think of themselves as accommodation and hospitality. And so Neighbors is in about 7 or 8 sectors, and we are expanding to another 6 in the next couple of years. And a lot of these sectors, again, they don't think of themselves as buildings, right? Like we work with hospitals. They are the healthcare sector. We are going to expand to industrial buildings very likely in 6 months, starting that process. And again, they don't think of themselves as buildings. They're manufacturers, they're distribution centers, they're cold stores for supermarkets. So we're doing a lot of work. The Australian government's actually been very, very supportive of Neighbours. They sit in our board and they're the government chair of our board. And we're working really closely with them to expand to a lot of these sectors over the next few years. It also includes sectors like schools as well, education, universities. So the process of creating a new Neighbours tool is that we actually create really high quality tools. And to do that, we need to go into a sector and get a lot of data. So, what is the average energy use of an industrial warehouse? And is it climate affected? If you go to Darwin, it's tropical. If you're in Tasmania, it's kind of like the similar climate zone that northern Germany. So climate is a factor. But what is the impact of climate? If you're in Tasmania, are you using 4% more energy, or are you using 25% more energy? What is the impact of operating more hours? If you double the amount of hours to double the amount of energy, the answer is always not at all. It's always a different impact. So to create high quality Neighbours tools, this is what we did in the UK as well. We go into a market, we get a lot of data, location, operation hours, how big is the facility, in real energy consumption, and really create the absolute best algorithms and equations that we can that really represent performance. And I think there's something that we should, organizations like us, but also sister programs like Energy Star in the US, I think we could do a lot more as well to explain that thought process and how we create those benchmarks so more people could do that in other countries.
Yeah, so I think, I should disclose, member of the National Steering Committee for Neighbours. So I'm a passionate advocate for Neighbours, as you are, Carlos. I think there's different ways of collaborating. It could be sort of Neighbours, is shared around the world, but even just the insights and the processes that you go through in terms of creating those really, really granular products that support different parts of the economy to transition. I think there's a lot of interest and appetite for sharing the process and the thinking with other nations, as well as the Neighbours product itself.
There's something that Tanya mentioned before, and I think Carsten mentioned it as well, that really resonated with me, which is the importance of creating things that drive ecosystems. And I think the one feature about Neighbours, because you have to look at your energy performance on a year-by-year basis, and you must reduce energy consumption is the only way to get better. It really created a huge industry of people that created services that most people in most countries didn't think they need, like deep energy analytics, messages every Monday to the facility manager on you're using 17% more than last week. What happened? And often it's not even about telling them what happened, just give them the right piece of information at the right time. And a lot of the particularly energy efficiency analytics, and I know, Luke, that you do a lot of work with them. Some of them are your members. In Australia, it's a really sophisticated market, but it's partly because they just had so much work in practice in Australia, and then suddenly they realized when, in the UK, there weren't that many competitors in that market, and in the US and in France, and a lot of them became sort of global companies in that process. I think that is some of those really important additional values about creating an ecosystem, is that you create a huge demand for innovation and people will come up with better products over time.
Look, as you can probably tell, Carlos and I could talk about Neighbours underwater for hours and hours, so I'll probably put a pin in it there, Carlos. But Tanya, we've had a question from our audience around the role of energy retailers in driving energy efficiency. Here in Australia, we have a number of energy efficiency obligation schemes. Some are white certificate schemes, others are direct obligations, but retailers play a key role in energy efficiency markets, particularly in the residential space. Is there anything analogous to that in terms of direct retailer involvement with supporting customers to improve their energy performance?
We have got an energy rating certificate as well for residential houses. You need that if you want to rent it to someone or if you want to sell it. And the idea was that it's going to be really a market tool. But the problem is in Germany that there's a lack of houses or flats for rent. We have a huge renting market, and there are more people looking for places to rent than there actually are, especially in Berlin or Hamburg, Frankfurt. So it hasn't become really a market tool. People have it, but it's not really something that people work with it and go into action. It includes suggestions for modernization as well, but yeah, it really hasn't. My point of view, it really isn't a market tool that people really get into action because they have got one of the energy certificates for their houses, and then they say, okay, I take those steps now. I have to do it.
Is there an interaction between that performance certificate and the product that the KfW offers in terms of tracking and improvement in energy performance?
There's let me think what the English name is. Kassensanierungsfahrplan.
I would say a renovation schedule.
Okay. Renovation schedule. How shall I explain it? It's a consulting tool. If you are a house owner and you want to get a plan, what kind of renovation you should take, you hire an energy consulting coming to your house, and there's a funding for this energy consultancy in the moment. And then you get a renovation plan for the next 10 years, the next decades, and they give you advices what kind of funding you should use, and that you get an idea of the whole house and that the steps fit together, that you're not saying, oh yeah, I start with the heating, and then they say, yeah, but look, you should maybe start with the isolation because the isolation is so bad, and then you need a smaller heating system and you have a better isolation, so that the measures and plans are fit together. So there's a connection.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. And Grace, we're coming to the close of our panel session. I just wanted to check in with you in terms of what you've heard around the policy ecosystem in Germany, and particularly the presentation around the KfW Bank. What do you think the takeouts are for Australia from a financing perspective, both for the CFC, but also for policymakers and other organisations that are interested in driving improvements in energy efficiency, particularly in existing buildings?
Yeah, and it was amazing watching the KfW presentation. I felt like what I had in my mind had actually come into fruition. So in my mind, okay, I'm at year 1, KfW is at year 13, but I'll get there because they've gotten there. So one of the things that we're really looking to drive at the Clean Energy Finance Corporation is to, just like KfW has done, establish a minimum energy efficiency home criteria standard for the banks to adopt. And that will then drive best practice, which is what KfW has done. And what we also really want to do is not only look after the bank side in terms of the financing side, but provide educational material to the occupiers of the homes. In Australia, there are some research that suggested that for higher energy efficient homes, unless the owners know how to use it, so how to when to open the windows, when to close the windows, close the blinds, they could end up spending more money in electricity by turning on the air conditioning. So what we also want to do is provide this tailored energy consultancy advice to individual homeowners, as well as an intelligent home occupier manual for anyone who's taking up a green home. So it was very exciting for me to watch the KfW presentation. And I think from a finance perspective, what I found very encouraging is, although I've only managed to find one bank to launch this product with me, I can see that KfW, through working with the banks and tweaking their products, they have managed to get so many more banks to sign on. So in my mind, we'll get there. It's a matter of time. And it was also very pleasing for me to see that KfW has so many different product suites. And the people on the panel actually said it's quite a simple product. So right now I have 2 products, and we do plan to recalibrate it somewhat. So hopefully we will be able to find a product that will help both sets of owner-occupiers as well as tenants or investors in the case.
Look, and I completely agree. And just to comment on something you said earlier, Grace, around the challenges of engaging with much larger banks in terms of that upskilling piece. I agree, it's a challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity. We have some banks that are involved in the Energy Efficiency Council. I think certainly at an executive level, there's a real appetite and interest in engaging in this market and staking out a leadership position in this market. And if we can successfully activate that interest and actually get those foot soldiers on the ground in bank branches across the country, having these conversations with people taking out a home loan or looking for some finance to upgrade their property, then that's going to be incredibly powerful in terms of supercharging activity in this space. So certainly we here at the Energy Efficiency Council stand ready to do whatever we can to support you on that journey and engagement, Grace, and wish you all the best. Carsten, I might turn to you to provide some closing comments from the German perspective as we conclude this panel. Sitting there with your 2 hats on, I suppose, as the chair of DENEF, our sister organisation in Germany, and also obviously a member of the German Parliament and a real global champion for the role of energy efficiency, both in Germany from around the world. Do you have any final thoughts to share?
I just want to thank you to all of you. So it's a brilliant idea to strengthen the collaboration between Germany and Australia, and we got there was a wonderful exchange of really good ideas. And I would point out one thing that energy efficiency is not about saving the world, saving the climate, and creating jobs. But also there's a very good chance to make it having the people fun. So I found it very interesting what Carlos was saying. So I would say we should, besides of funding and tax incentives and so on, we have to work on make energy efficiency more visible. To compete with the renewables as the second pillar of energy transition, and to make having the people to make it fun for the people, we have to implement a little bit more of gamification, I would call it, to make the people see what slight changes of behavior may affect in energy saving, and then make this world a better place.
Absolutely, it's something that we're very passionate about here at the Energy Efficiency Council, and the way we talk about that concept that you just outlined so eloquently, Carsten, is making the invisible visible. And making sure that we do put energy efficiency up on a platform, and we are able to communicate the benefits that are meaningful to people in their own lives. And for homeowners, that might be comfort, that might indeed be health, as well as things like bill savings and carbon savings and the like. And for businesses, there's a fantastic story to tell around productivity and around improved performance of staff and all the rest of it. So I think we're getting better at telling that story. Christoph's tambourines are certainly helping. But with that, I think we need to wrap up today's panel. It's been a fascinating discussion. This is the first of many, and I look forward to inviting you all back for further conversations, both publicly and privately over the coming months and years. But thank you, Carsten, Grace, Tanya, and Carlos, for being so generous with your time, and looking forward to further collaboration. All right, we are almost at the end of today's forum, but before I finish up, I want to invite our event partners, Franziska Teichmann from Adelphi and Christoph, my mate Christoph from the German Chamber, to join me for some final thoughts. Welcome both.
Thank you, Luke. And I have to say, I got goosebumps. What a webinar, really. And I remember 2 years ago when we met in Melbourne for the big energy efficiency expo, you were standing on this stage with, I think, 1,000 participants, and you were talking about the Avengers of energy efficiency. And I think we proved today that we are we could be here, the Avengers of energy efficiency as well. And I would really very heartily also welcome Franziska from Adelphi, who is actually at the forefront of the Avengers, really, with all the bilateral work we are doing. So a big thank you also from my side, and a big welcome to you also, Franziska, for I know it's early in Germany, but you have been earlier, in other discussions. You wake up at 4, and even earlier if the German-Australian relations require it. So a very big thank you for all of that. And before I give you the final word, I have to say just a quick thing. I said in the beginning I was optimistic for 3 reasons. Now it's actually 5 and more. So we have heard about Neighbors, great instrument, and obviously there's big interest in Germany as well, because it's a market system, it's a market instrument, and it's not just relying on sticks and incentives. Also, there's minimum rental standards now introduced. We haven't really touched upon that, but that's something also which could be quite interesting in Germany as well. And we have 1 billion Australian dollars to be spent in Victoria. So I would like to cordially invite German companies to come to Australia, actually, to seize this potential, to bring the products and services here to Australia, and to serve the renovation wave, which will eventually happen here. And we already have a great cohort of champions, such as Siemens, Stiebel Eltron, Knauf Insulation, and many others in the energy efficiency sector, which are already our members. So I think we spoke about it. It ticks so many boxes, and there's really big potential also for businesses to come here to invest and to actually drive energy efficiency in buildings. Having said all that, once again, a very big thank you. And I think, I was missing one word. It's the renovation roadmap, I think, which is a good thing. And I know that, Franzi, you will talk about it, but even whilst this was just 2 hours, I think there's so much to discuss that I think it's a wonderful idea to put it all into a report. And please let me close by saying, I can't go without an invitation here to this great country, to my German friends and colleagues. Please come here. When you have the opportunity, let us together explore those opportunities we have. There will be a time when travel is possible again. I know it worked perfectly today, and it's fantastic that we did it, but there's more than just 2 senses of listening and viewing. So it would be lovely to bring us all together here in Australia. Thank you.
Here, Christoph, we completely endorse that. We really look forward to being at a time when conditions allow our friends in Germany to visit us here in Australia. But by the same token, I think we're overdue for a visit to Germany here from Australia as well. And I have visited Germany a couple of times, specifically to look at the energy efficiency market there, and hope to do so again very, very soon. But Franziska, you have been instrumental in pulling this collaboration together. So thank you for keeping on top of me and Christoph, and keeping our minds focused on getting this webinar done and bringing all these wonderful panelists together. I wonder if you had any final thoughts, particularly on the pathway forward and some of the things that we might be doing together in 2021.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. Thank you, Christoph. Thanks for your kind words, and also looking forward to our discussions, but also especially to April, when the time difference will be only 8 hours again, I think, and I don't have to get up in the middle of the night. Let me start, first of all, with a big thanks to all of the keynote speakers and panelists and the audience today for the inputs and the valuable discussion. And secondly, thanks again to the Energy Efficiency Council, Luke, and your team, and also the German-Australian Chamber, Christoph and his colleagues, for organizing today's amazing webinar and helping in pulling together the interesting program. And of course, for being the very competent and charming moderators today. It was a pleasure watching you. I enjoyed today's presentations and discussions a lot, even though I'm not an expert in energy efficiency. One thing became very clear for me today is that energy efficiency in the building sector has big success stories in both of our countries, which we learned today, but also has a lot of work remaining. And therefore, it offers very great opportunities for our bilateral cooperation. And these opportunities range from sharing experiences and policy and measures, but also in initiating behavioral change, as we also heard, but also potentially creating business prospects and business collaboration. Well, Christoph summarized the discussions very briefly just now, so I won't try to do a better job than him. Let me just make some broader comments and link today's webinar into the whole energy collaboration. As mentioned before several times, this webinar is part of the work of the sub-working group on energy efficiency within the Australia-Germany Energy Working Group. And to give you some context, the Energy Working Group is the bilateral energy partnership of the Australian and German governments, and it's led by the ministries responsible for energy. So on the German side, this is the BMWI, who we've also heard from today, and on the Australian side, it's Stiser. Adelphi and myself are supporting the German ministry with the work in the Energy Working Group, and that's also the reason why I was kindly invited today and allowed some brief remarks now. The German ministry has many other energy partnerships and dialogues with a range of partner countries besides Australia. And the goal of all of them is to work together for a successful energy transition in the conviction that global cooperation is the necessary approach. And energy efficiency is a key part of the energy transition, as we discussed today. But as mentioned today a few times, it's also a part of the energy transition that has been undervalued, or undervalued, maybe underexposed is the better word, in the past. And also with Australia, our bilateral dialogue is often dominated by topics such as the expansion of renewables, the implications for security of supply and such, and also, of course, hydrogen. So I'm really happy that the dialogue and cooperation on energy efficiency between Australia and Germany is off to a great start now, thanks to the sub-working group on energy efficiency, thanks to Luke, thanks to Christoph. Following this webinar, we will have a short report on the cooperation potentials, has been mentioned a couple of times. We also plan on conducting many more activities in the space to share best practices as well as lessons learned from both countries and dive deeper into the topics discussed today. When possible, again, we might, for example, host physical delegation trips as well as other virtual events. So please look out for them. In the future, we will probably also address other areas for collaboration in terms of energy efficiency, such as industry. So thanks again, everyone. I'm excited to continuing the discussions and the cooperation in 2021 and beyond that. Back to you, Luke.
Thank you, Franziska. And again, thank you for all of your hard work, and you too, Christoph, for pulling this event together. It's been an outstanding event, as you both said, pulled together at relatively short notice. So looking forward to more where this came from. And I also want to call out all our speakers, incredible speakers: Lily D'Ambrosio, Carsten Muller, Jens Acker, Carlos Flores, Grace Tam, Bettina Dorendorf, and of course, Tanya Lewis. And a special shout out to Julianne Tice at the Energy Efficiency Council and Max Schnarr at the German Chamber for all their hard work behind the scenes to get this event up and running. Jumping in front of the microphone and chatting about my favourite topic is absolutely the easy bit. I'm sure you'd agree, Christoph. So all credit must go to them for doing all the hard work in the background. Rest assured, we'll be in touch with everyone that registered for this session to make sure you have links to the recording of the session so you can share them with your networks. And of course, we'll share a copy of the research report, which Franziska just referenced, when it's finalised. But for now, it is goodbye from us. All the best for the festive season, and we'll catch you in 2021.